Test, test.
Where are your books?
Oh, yeah. Do we have the books? The book. Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll find it at the end. Thanks, everyone, for coming. My name is Laura Mae Martin. I am the Executive Productivity Advisor at Google. What that actually means is that I coach our executives on the topic of productivity, and I run the Productivity at Google program. And I also work directly with our Workspace product teams on the topic of productivity and continuing to make them more and more productive. So I'm here today with Aspi. I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Aspi Havewala. I work for Verizon, and I manage their digital workplace and end-user support organizations.
So we're going to chat for 15 minutes. I'm going to ask Aspi some questions, and then we'll have time at the end for questions from you all. So Aspi and I met 6 or so years ago, and I was going on site at Verizon for some Google Workspace events and rolling out the products to Verizon. And we were partnering together on helping employees at Verizon be more productive and more impactful and increasing their digital dexterity. And it was kind of the first time that some of the material that I had been training on at Google as far as productivity had reached outside of Google. So it's kind of dipping my toes in the water of how does this information land? And so Verizon was really the first time that some of this material had been taken outside of Google and led to the development of the material that's now in the book. And we're supposed to have some copies of the book up here. Maybe we'll get them. So today we'll talk about that and about Verizon and their journey with Google Workspace. So, oops, can we go back one slide? Oh, sorry. So back one slide again if you can. Thank you. So the book is about taking actionable steps. It's about really specific things that you can do to increase your overall productivity and your well-being. Sometimes we think those go opposite directions, and it goes into actual tactical strategies and how to make technology work for you and instead of against you. And so the first question that I want to dive into with Aspi is just thinking about Verizon and moving to Google Workspace 5 years ago now, and just thinking about that cultural shift and how you all thought about bringing that change to Verizon.
Yeah, it's a great question. So a lot of what you talked about earlier kind of made its way from Verizon into your book, the work that you did with Google and Verizon as well. But when we were thinking about our digital workplace, what we really wanted to focus on was, could we make it into a competitive differentiator, right? Can we give our employees something no other workplace has? And so we set out to build that, and we wanted it to be kind of a living, breathing digital workplace. So we wanted it to be modern, adaptable, flexible, all of those things, move with the times. And real-time collaboration, we were thinking a lot back then about it. It was really kind of table stakes for us because it matches the velocity of Verizon. We wanted our people to work in that mindset. So we very quickly realized that when you deploy a set of tools, you can deploy a great set of tools, but if you don't take the employees along for the journey, it really doesn't matter. And so we started leading with change management very early on, which was, I think, one of the better things we did. Having conversations with users, communicating with them, training them, just taking feedback and changing the loop on how we kind of made these things happen. So that was super key. And we started by building a group of folks. We used to call them Google Gurus back then. We now call them Google Champions, or later on we call them Google Champions. And these are folks that are in every single company that really go for these new ways of working. They really have a propensity to do that, and they can amplify your message across your organization. So we sought them out. We built that network. And then once we deployed it, something really interesting happened. So what we realized is that in a SaaS world, the change is constant. It's not like you get a new release every 3 years like you used to. And so we decided to make it into an ongoing program of change management, and we call it digital dexterity. So the idea is that can you constantly be talking to your folks about how to make them more proficient with these tools as new features are coming in, how to make the best of those new features and bring the best of yourself to work as well. So that's the focus now of our program. And then we went back to our champions and we re-recruited them. We rebranded the program. They're now called Digital Workplace Influencers. And I never thought that would work, but everybody loves that name. So that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think like you said, the biggest success was not focusing on the change to Workspace. It was focusing on the adaptation to change, and then that's continued to benefit as things change, as they do, and it's not just this one-time flip over. It's just what's next, and having those Google guides. I mean, I remember as a Googler being on site, and the Google guides were just, you know, excited. They got people excited. They helped us understand what things with the product that your team cared most about. And so it was just like this web that you set up that has continued to benefit you. I think that was so important to the success. So next, just thinking about personal productivity, since that's, you know, what the book about and what you're focused on as well. So how are you thinking about that, about personal productivity and how people get things done in your current landscape?
Yeah, you know, it's kind of an interesting question because we always think of personal productivity in the context of collaboration. So how productive are you when you're working as part of a larger team? And that's super important to us. So the two most common complaints we get from our users these days is, number one, I've got way too much information coming at me and I've got digital fatigue. And the second that we get is, I'm spending so much time jumping between applications to get my work done. So why can't they all just work together? So when we are thinking about productivity, we think a lot about how do we fill up the spaces between these applications. We've got a lot of cool tools, but we need to make them work together. And so we've got a dedicated team that reaches out to our users, that understands their needs, their pain points, what we call the unmet needs of the users that they don't articulate, and really spend a lot of time making these apps work together. And it could be super simple, which would delight somebody, and it could be super complicated. Like, out of office is a really good example, right? How many tools do we have to set out of office in? And so now we've got one tool that does it across the board and does it in a very elegant way, and it's one consistent message that goes out to everybody, and it reads it right off of Google Calendar. So something simple like that, and something more complicated, like how do you collaborate in a safe and secure and auditable way externally as well, using the same tools you're using internally, not deploying another tool. That's a pretty complex tool that we had to build. But it can be any range in between that really helps people feel more productive, and then filling up the spaces between those applications as well. So that's really been an area of focus for us.
And on the topic of personal productivity, what comes to mind often is email and Gmail, and that's such a personal switch, and it's something people are using so much and so ingrained in. And so one of the things that I talk about in the book and that I had been teaching for about 10 years at Google was the inbox zero mindset, and thinking about your email like laundry. You empty your dryer and you put things into piles based on what you need to do with them next. Fold, hang, match your socks. But when we do our email, we kind of go into the dryer, we pick one thing, we fold it, it's never empty, we turn it back on, we throw in wet clothes back with the dry clothes, mark is unread, I'll deal with it later. So, you know, that's how a lot of people are just working within their email, and it can be an energy suck and a time suck. And so that inbox zero shift and more of a systematic approach to email versus feature based, that was something that we had a lot of success internally with, and so we brought it to Verizon, and we enabled your, at the time, Google Guides to lead that training throughout the company. So can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So Inbox Zero is like our most blockbuster training class ever. And thank you for bringing that methodology to Verizon. And if you've never experienced it, hopefully you'll be able to experience it with Laura's book as well. But the idea behind it was that you take your kind of really painful process of reading and processing your email. You're reading, you're trying to understand, you're responding, and instead transform it into almost like a live dashboard of everything you have to do for the day and for the week, and really helps you prioritize those tasks as well. So it's a pretty magical thing. And most people come to us and tell me, they'll just unsolicited walk up to me and say, you know what, that was a real game changer for us. It just changed the way my team works entirely. And so it was an important lesson for us, because what we realized was you can teach people about Gmail, but the conversation changes when you instead start talking to them about, let me show you how to do your email in the most productive way. So you move the conversation from a tool to a use case. And that is a big game changer in how you interact with your employees. And we've taken that learning and we've applied to lots of different areas as well. Like let's say you're a project manager and you've got all these collaboration tools you could use. You could use Sheets, Docs, Slides. You could use Smart Sheets, any other tool you have in the enterprise. And we can teach you about all these tools individually, and it might never click. But if we collect all of them and say, let me talk to you as a project manager and tell you how to use these tools in the most effective way to manage the velocity of your team, that becomes an incredibly interesting conversation. And it pays a lot of dividends.
Right, like you said, because the user is thinking about the use case, not the features. And so when you come at them with features, that's just a lot to take in. But when you say, okay, how do you plan an event with Google Workspace? That speaks to them. And now they're seeing all the tools that come together. And so I know you all, all the times I came back, I just would see those types of trainings going on. And it was so cool how you took that mindset shift and really ran with it. It was great. And so what's next for Verizon, and how are you all thinking about generative AI and how that affects your workplace?
There's two things that we have been thinking a lot about. One thing we've been thinking a lot about, the other one is, of course, Gen AI. But what we've realized is that when these SaaS platforms are deployed in the enterprise, they tend to be incredibly powerful platforms for automating workflow and tasks. And what's interesting is because they have an open API, and you can learn about these APIs on google.com pretty much, right? No special training required. We found that a lot of people had started using them in super interesting ways to start automating their tasks and doing some really cool and funky things. And so we said, what if we take on the responsibility of helping everybody learn how to do this? Not just the people who are tech savvy, but even the people who are not tech savvy. And so how do we make it equitable? So we've been spending a lot of time on what we call citizen development, creating a set of processes around the APIs that will help people, first of all, discover them, learn them, see the art of the possible. So supporting that in communities, and then really starting to use it. And it's interesting because with Gen AI, you can actually have it write code for you, believe it or not. And we've tried it many times. It'll actually crank out Google Apps Scripts code. It'll actually show you how to write filters. The other day I was demoing to my CIO on how I use Gen AI to show me how to write a filter so that it would immediately flag his emails with a little yellow label saying CIO. And that's part of Inbox Zero as well, by the way. And it'll do all of that for you. So it's super exciting, the nexus of how this happens. But we want people to be able to unlock this platform, become citizen developers, automate it to a great degree possible. And then Gen AI is kind of an interesting conversation because when we first started experiencing it, right, it was really tough to engage because you really weren't sure what to do with it. And even today, when I was at the keynote and when people were running their Gen AI demos, I'm like, what is it going to do? But it was very predictable, which is great. But it tends to give you sometimes different answers, so you really have to grapple with it. You have to kind of change the mindset of how you engage with Gen AI, as opposed to having predictable answers delivered by a system. But what we've taken on is how do we take Gen AI and make it equitable for everybody? Because at the end of the day, just like real-time collaboration became table stakes, we think Gen AI is going to become table stakes. And we really don't want to leave anybody behind. We want to make sure everybody has a crack at it. They find their comfort zone with how best to leverage Gen AI. So we spend a lot of time, first of all, learning it ourselves, thinking about it, having conversations with people, sharing their frustrations or likes and dislikes internally within the team, with Google as well, so that we can kind of build that landscape out and make it table stakes for everybody, just like we did with real-time collab so many years ago. And that, I think, matches the velocity of Verizon, but any other company that is trying to move fast, that has a lot coming at it, a lot of information coming at it as well. It's really cool for that. So we think it's going to make a huge impact there.
I love that. Just thinking about AI is not just for the tech team. It's for everyone. And I think back to our first question, because you had already set up that landscape of digital dexterity and the constant change, and you were ready for it, and it makes the rollout of something like this so much easier than trying to start from scratch with every new big change. So kudos to you for doing that. So I think that's it for us.